places. So the Federation of Law Societies of Canada is undergoing a consultation with respect to how best to respond to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, and specifically Call 27, which involves the incorporation of Indigenous reconciliation principles related to that into the practice of law. And so this consultation is ongoing. And the Law Society of Nunavut, in view of Nunavut's particular role and existence as a Inuit territory, feel it's very significant and important that we don't just rubber stamp this, and that we undertake a significant consultation on this, and seek as much input as possible on this Article 27, this Call 27 consultation. So I wanted to go through what this all involves. And so I hope I'm not explaining things to you that you already know, but just so we're all on the same page. The Federation of Law Societies of Canada is not a governing body that governs the law societies. Rather, it is an association, an organization through which law societies can collegially work together. And so it can help us all with best practices. And to this end, it instituted a model code of professional conduct in 2009, and it was adopted by the Council of Federation of Law Society, which has representatives from all across Canada and the different provincial and territorial law societies, including the Law Society of Nunavut. And the intent of the model code of professional conduct was, even though the regulation of lawyers is a provincial and territorial jurisdiction issue, it was considered to be in the best interests of Canadians, the public that we ultimately represent, and also the profession at large, to have as much synchronization between the ethical and professional obligations of all legal professionals across the country. And so 13 out of 14 law societies have adopted this model code. And so this model code is overseen by a standing committee, and that standing committee seeks to ensure that that model code is responsive to current legal practices and ethics. And so that was what happened in 2009. There was this model code adopted. And the FLSC Model Code Standing Committee is looking at, and has been looking at since the 2015 report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, dealing with the residential schools that were a cultural genocide against Indigenous people, to determine what responses need to be made in the form of changes to the FLSC model code in response to the TRC. So the FLSC Model Code Standing Committee has spent considerable time looking at elements of Call to Action 27. So the members of the committee, and I've spoken with the Federation of Law Societies staff working on this, Sarah McKenzie in particular. Members of that committee attended educational programming, did their own consultation, speaking to experts, spoke with Indigenous legal practitioners and academics. And so they went through a preliminary round of engagement with 20 individuals and groups, looking at how to change this model code. And so in response, or in the conclusion of that consultation, was the development of the proposed amendments that we're now looking at. So this is a further consultation on what the Federation of Law Societies is proposing after their consultation. So Call to Action 27 is found in the report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And the call says, we call upon the Federation of Law Societies, so specifically to the Federation, to ensure that lawyers receive appropriate cultural competency training, including the history and legacy of residential schools, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, treaties on Indigenous and Aboriginal rights, Indigenous law, and Aboriginal Crown relations. This will require skills-based training in intercultural competency, conflict resolution, human rights, and anti-racism. So this call to action is quite broad in its coverage of topics which lawyers should receive training and education on as they relate to Indigenous peoples. And in accordance with this, the FLSC has determined it's appropriate for the model code to be reviewed and amendment in light of Call to Action 27. So Call to Action 27 directly talks about education and training, but the model code sets minimum standards for the education and training of lawyers. And so this is the indirect consequence of this. So the FLSC is made some proposals, and the key elements are to set out ethical rules for legal professionals, not the skills, not how the skills and knowledge will be acquired. So it is legal education providers who are going to have the discretion to make that determination. So it doesn't mandate any particular type of training. The different provincial and territorial law societies have their own jurisdiction to determine what kinds of training should be undertaken. The amendments avoid using specific terms like intercultural competency and focus on duties relating to this concept. And so the four concepts are: the focus should be on building knowledge and communication skills in order to be competent. So in order to be competent, there's a reframing of that in these proposals to ensure that communication is accessible for Indigenous and Inuit people. A baseline level of knowledge and communication skills should be required of all legal professionals, whether or not they are serving specifically Indigenous clients, that there is an expectation that this baseline level of knowledge should be there on the part of all individuals practicing law. A higher level of knowledge and communication should be required when practitioners are engaging directly with Indigenous clients or other parties who are Indigenous. And there are proposed changes to the code to improve client services and enhance public protection that are beyond the scope of Call to Action 27. So Call to Action 27 is seen as the jumping off point, and then there is further and other call to improve client service and enhance public protection. So the FLSC, rather than adding a particular portion to the model code dealing specifically with Indigenous peoples, has made amendments throughout. So rather than kind of adding it on at the end, they have integrated the amendments throughout the model code. And the amendments are found in a series of places, including the preface. What is meant by integrity, the first duty of lawyer. What is meant by competence, and that's actually where most of the changes are proposed, because the notion of intercultural competency, which isn't directly worded as such in the changes to model code, it's the idea is that to be competent, a lawyer in Canada has to be competent in addressing reconciliation, has to be competent in addressing Indigenous clients and Indigenous parties, with respect to the quality of service, with respect to the role of lawyer's advocate, duties of principal and supervising an articling student, and also with respect to discrimination. There are modifications to reflect what is set out there. There are specific proposed amendments that are at this link, so I will lead you to it. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but I would encourage you to look through the draft amendments. You can see that they are integrated throughout. And here, some of the content of what I've been saying has been drawn from this. And the background of process and review is outlined here, as well as the draft amendments. So we see all of the draft amendments in red. And so what I would encourage you to do subsequent to this conversation is go through the red lined amendments, and you can circle back to Santana or myself if you have any thoughts or comments on these red line amendments. We are going to be conducting in-person consultations, and during those in-person consultations, we will be providing time for the persons present to discuss these and provide feedback on these red lined amendments. And so I invite you to, after this online session, to look through the red wording and provide us any comments or feedback that you have with respect to that wording, with respect to whether you think it's appropriate, and keeping in mind too, in context, the nature of regulation and the nature of the model code, because these are now what was placed in the call were requirements for education of lawyers. What the model code does is it regulates lawyers. So this is a creation of new minimum standards for lawyers. So this consultation, so this online is a piece of a consultation. We are inviting your comments. So again, please circle back to us. The full report is available on the FLSC website. It is also available as a link on this slide presentation that is provided in association with this presentation today. The deadline for input is November 29th. Please provide your comments or your thoughts prior to that time. We will be compiling all the feedback we receive from our in-person sessions as well as from this online session in order to provide a comprehensive and detailed set of feedback to lawyers. There are new rules and commentary proposed in the model code. And these revisions highlight where the standing committee felt it was necessary to elaborate on how they specifically apply to Indigenous peoples. So again, we are looking for your feedback. We would like to know specifically just 3 questions to maybe frame your responses. Are these amendments appropriate in general and specifically? Are they sufficient? Is this enough? Should there be other amendments? Would you recommend other things? And do you have any additional comments or feedback to provide? So we would welcome your thoughts on the model code, on the TRC, on Call 27, and in general with respect to reconciliation, particularly in the territory of Nunavut. And again, as I said, we're engaging in a series of in-person consultations on this as well. Just one moment. So again, we are available for your feedback. We are seeking your comments. And just to go back again, specifically, we would like to know what your thoughts are specifically on these proposals, whether they are enough, whether they're the right direction, whether you think something else should be done by the Federation of Law Societies, and whether you have any additional comments or feedback in general. And we really want to open this up. As I said, we're doing in-person consultations in a variety of locations, in Iqaluit, in Ottawa, in other places too. A lot of our lawyers practicing in Nunavut are actually located outside of the territory, so we want to make sure that we make these consultations accessible to everyone. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And again, all of the information on our events are included on the Law Society website as well.
Yes, exactly. And everyone is welcome to attend these events. And yes, thank you. And the response in the chat that you'll think about it. I think it is the kind of thing that it is useful for people to go back and think about. And I would encourage you, if you are planning to attend one of the in-person sessions, it's not a bad idea to look at the proposed amendments beforehand, if you can, if you have the time. When we do the in-person sessions, we will be providing time for group work with respect to it, to be having discussions around it, because these issues are, as the Federation themselves has found when they undertook the consultation to make these proposals, these issues can be quite complex, and it's important that that this is dealt with in an appropriately sensitive and thoughtful manner, and that the consultations are done sufficiently to make this appropriate. So I see we have a new person coming in, and we're just kind of wrapping up here. So again, the full consultation material is posted on the website for the Law Society of Nunavut. And again, you can certainly email me directly if you have any questions or comments, if you have any responses, if you'd like to discuss this and have a conversation around it. Happy to do any of that. And again, the deadline is November 29th.
Correct. Yes, and this presentation will be available on the Law Society website. So we also are holding additional sessions virtually as well. So if there is any questions that you do have from reviewing this presentation or reviewing the materials that Rebecca has provided as well, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Santana. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And again, oh, looks like we have another question in the chat. Question of how this might affect internationally trained lawyers, as well as making the legal profession more accessible to Inuit law students. And I think those are important questions. So I would encourage you to, as you go through this, think about the different groups of people who are impacted and affected by these rules, who makes up the profession, specifically in Nunavut, and how these proposed changes would impact our jurisdiction. And that is very much what we want to hear more about. Okay, and Santana, the comments in the chat, maybe we can bring those in as part of a compiled set of comments, and to make sure that everything is included and reflected in our final report. And again, I just want to underscore and repeat that the Law Society of Nunavut is taking this consultation process very seriously. We don't want to simply rubber stamp this. It has a unique impact on our jurisdiction because we are in Inuit territory. And in consequence, we really need to focus on how this is going to have an impact in our jurisdiction, how this relates specifically to Inuit people. So I think we can wrap up there. And actually, one advantage is when we post it on the website, maybe it's more accessible if it's a little bit briefer, seeing no questions at this point. And that's totally fine because it's the kind of thing you want to maybe go back and take a look at. So I really strongly encourage you to look at the consultation materials and do get back to us if you have any thoughts about them. We will be compiling your comments and providing detailed and thoughtful feedback to the Federation Law Society so that this consultation is truly meaningful.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. So as Rebecca said, a recording will be made available. It'll be uploaded today for anybody who missed it, or if they have additional questions or want to receive the link, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or Rebecca.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from anyone who has thoughts on this.